She poured boiling water all over her husband when she found out that he inappropriately touched their son. At the age of 21, Corinna Smith married 42-year-old Michael Baines, and they had been married before and had children with those past relationships, but together they had a son and named him Craig. To family and friends, they seemed like your typical couple. They had their ups and downs in their marriage, but they seemed very happy. However, behind closed doors, Michael was very controlling, and this is just something that Corinna would deal with. By the time they had been married for 38 years, Corinna was 59 and Michael was 80. His health was declining, so she had to take on the role of his career. 2007, Corinna and Michael's only son, Craig, had been deeply troubled and even served time in prison for a serious assault. His downward spiral was something his family struggled to understand, so when Corinna talked to him about it, all he said was, "Mom, he's a PDF file and he touched me." Corinna assumed that he was talking about the man that he attacked and he went to prison for, and the next day Craig seemed more happier, so she decided not to press him further about it. Then, in a devastating turn, Craig ended up taking his own life. Corinna was left shattered, drowning in guilt, feeling like she should have pressed him more about the situation, talked about it with him, and felt like maybe she could have saved him in some way. The grief and guilt consumed her, following her like a shadow every single day. On July 13th of 2020, Corinna spent the day shopping with her daughter before returning to her daughter's house, and this is a daughter from a previous relationship. Once they got to her daughter's house, Corinna didn't want to leave just yet. She wanted to spend more time with her daughter, so she called her husband Michael to tell him that she was going to be home late, but Michael was not having it. He was unhappy, and he seemed very impatient for her to come home. Corinna's daughter could sense the tension between her mother and her stepfather, and she told her mother to ask Michael, her stepfather, to reveal what he had done, or she was going to tell her mom herself. Finally, her daughter broke down and told her mom that Michael had been essaying her and her brother Craig for years. She told her mom Corinna that it was so bad that she couldn't even tell her, and that's the reason why Craig ended his life. Corinna was in complete shock trying to process everything, but then she remembered what Craig had told her, and that's when she put two and two together. Her first instinct was to call police, but then her daughter just told her to wait because she didn't want the family to become divided. But then Corinna came up with a plan to get a polygraph test for the both of them to see who was telling the truth. That night, Corinna decided she was going to take matters into her own hands, so she grabbed a bucket from her garden and poured boiling water inside of it. She then poured in 3 bags of sugar to create a thick, scalding mixture, and this took about 13 minutes. While Michael was asleep in the bed, Corinna entered the room and poured the boiling sugar water on his arms and torso. Most of the mixture landed on him, and it caused severe burns. This caused Michael to wake up screaming in pain, and Corinna left him in his bed by himself. She runs out the door. She runs to a nearby neighbor's house 8 doors down. She's banging on the door telling the neighbor, "Hey, I've hurt him really bad and I think I might have killed him." That neighbor immediately called police, and when Corinna was taken into custody, she was said to be howling in distress. Once paramedics arrived to the home, they saw Michael in excruciating pain, and the skin on his right hand and arm was peeling away. He ended up being rushed to the hospital and was sent to the burns unit, and he stayed there for over a month and he was stabilizing, but then because of his age and his overall health, he ended up passing away. Following the incident, Corinna was initially charged with bodily harm, but once Michael had passed away, it was upgraded to murder. During trial, Corinna denied the murder, stating that she only wanted to harm her husband. She didn't want to kill him. June 15th of 2021, Corinna was found guilty of murder and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 12 years and will be eligible for parole on June 3rd of 2032.
And imagine that. You gave birth to your murderer simply because you wouldn't buy him a VR headset. In 2022, mother of 4, Kiana Mann would start her day as normal, only after this morning, nothing would ever be normal again. She would go downstairs to the basement to do some laundry, and after a while, her 10-year-old son named Noah would come down the stairs, and it wasn't long before she realized he had a gun. A single gunshot would sound off inside of the basement, and Noah would go upstairs to get his sister, bringing her downstairs where she saw her mother bleeding out from a gunshot wound to the head. When paramedics arrived, it was unfortunately too late. Kiana would be pronounced dead on arrival. The close proximity of the bullet killed her almost immediately. Now, police would interview Noah to get an understanding as to what happened. He would tell police that he was simply twirling the gun around his finger when it accidentally fired and hit his mother in the head. But strangely enough, he wasn't showing any emotion for someone that accidentally shot and killed their own mother. In fact, he didn't seem fazed by it at all. Noah would finish the first round of questioning and then be released to family members. He was able to go home. And this was partly due to his age as well as police needing some additional information in order to move forward. But not even a full day of him being with family members would they contact police to give them more insight as to the behavioral issues that they had with Noah. He became enraged if he couldn't get his way, and they felt that this was one of those instances. Family members recalled times where Noah would pick the family dog up by its tail, swinging it around as it was barking and crying in pain, and he wouldn't stop unless someone took the dog from him. In addition to that, his own grandmother claimed that she was a little bit scared of him at night when they went to sleep because he liked to roam around the house while they were sleeping. His mother would eventually go and install cameras around the house to be able to keep an eye out on him and to see what he was actually doing when no one was around. Crazy enough, it would later be found that sometime before the shooting, the cameras within the home would be turned off, and it is believed that Noah was the only one who would have done it. Now, this is where everything starts to make sense because police would call in Noah for a second round of questioning, and this is where he would actually start to tell the truth about what happened that day. Noah explains that prior to the shooting, he had actually asked his mother to buy him a VR headset, and when she told him no, this completely angered him. When questioned as to how he even got the gun, he would tell investigators that he stole his mother's keys to her lockbox, got her gun out of it, and then would hold on to it the entire night until the next morning. When the next morning came, he would then go downstairs to confront his mother about her not buying him the VR headset. In addition to this, he claims that she woke him up very early that morning, so he was just enraged all over again. So with that being said, he shot his mother once in the head, then left to hide the gun in the living room closet, and then went to go get his sister, bringing her downstairs to see her mother bleeding out. Now, if this whole situation wasn't horrible enough, Noah would take it upon himself to log into his mother's Amazon account and still purchase the VR headset that she said that he could not get. And after being questioned, he would apologize for murdering his mother and then ask if his Amazon package had arrived yet. It was ruled that Noah be tried as an adult and was charged with first-degree intentional homicide, and if found guilty could face up to 60 years in prison. My condolences to the family of Kiana Mann. May she rest in peace. Let me know your thoughts on this case, and as always, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video as we continue our 3 nights of Crimesmas.
She tied up a Barbie doll and did stuff to it that she would later do to her best friend. 20-year-old Bethany Hill was a fun-loving, girly girl from Stratford-upon-Avon, a town in England. Everyone who knew her said the same thing. She was bright, bubbly, and full of light. She loved makeup, music, hanging out with her friends, and always tried to see the best in people, even when she shouldn't have. When Bethany was attending Stratford College, she became good friends with a transgender woman named Kaylee Woods. Bethany accepted Kaylee instantly. There was no judgment, just friendship. They talked about everything together, even the possibility of starting a family together, and Bethany truly believed that Kaylee cared about her. Through Kaylee, Bethany met Jack Williams, who became her boyfriend for a short time. After they broke up, they ended up remaining close friends, and then Kaylee started dating Jack. At one point, Bethany needed somewhere to stay, so she stayed in the flat that Kaylee and Jack shared. Jack wasn't even legally allowed to live there because he was on probation, but Kaylee didn't care. She just wanted him there with her. As the 3 were living together, Kaylee watched Bethany and Jack's friendship and saw how close they were. She felt threatened by Bethany and the attention that Jack was still giving her. Now, Kaylee had some dark fantasies, and those fantasies were to tie someone up, gag them, dominate them, and take total control over them. And the person she was fixated on was Bethany. On February 3rd of 2016, Bethany was attacked in the flat. She was restrained, gagged, tortured, and unalived in the bathroom. But Kaylee didn't call for help right away. She waited for more than 12 hours later. Once Kaylee did call for help, her performance was dramatic, hysterical, and suspicious. She claimed that Bethany cut her own throat, but the operator knew that something was off. Kaylee's story kept changing, her crying sounded exaggerated, and she couldn't really explain anything. Once paramedics arrived to the scene, it was revealed that Bethany was in full rigor mortis, meaning that she had been dead for hours. During the investigation, detectives searched Kaylee's grandmother's house and found something interesting. They found a box that belonged to Kaylee, and inside was a Barbie doll bound with tape, gagged, and had its hair dyed to look exactly like Bethany's. Kaylee used this Barbie doll to practice how she was going to unalive Bethany. She rehearsed the restraints, the knots, the posture, exactly what she was going to do to Bethany. Now, Kaylee wasn't the only one who did this to Bethany. Jack also participated. Jack helped restrain Bethany, and prosecutors described it as sadistic and carried out for perverted pleasure. Both Kaylee and Jack were convicted and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 26 years.
This teenage girl is one of the best preserved mummies in the world, but what had to happen for her to be preserved? Because this is a natural, accidental preservation. And this is your heads up that this video includes close-ups of her, and if you can't handle that, that's fine. I'll see you in another video. Otherwise, stay and learn what happened. It's due to the conditions on the volcano that she was found on. This is Uyayako, and it can be one of the coldest places on Earth. The average temperature at the summit is -15 Celsius, but it can drop to -40 Celsius and even lower. And the maiden was found just 25 meters below the summit. Adding the dry conditions and the low oxygen, this has created the perfect environment to preserve this girl for 500 years. This preserved all of her, and yes, that does include her hair and her clothes, and her feather headdress. Now, the maiden was one of 3 that were found, all dating to around the year 1500. That's just a few decades before the start of the Incan Empire fall. So if you'd like to meet those 2 other children, let me know in the comments. And if you want some recommended reading material, check my previous video's description.
That man lured that teenager through online gaming. She would never be seen alive again. On January 5th, 17-year-old Haley Busby left her home in Fishers, Indiana in the early morning hours. There wasn't a fight. She was still cool with her parents. She just wanted to meet a boyfriend that she met through online gaming platform. A boyfriend that was almost 40. Remember, Haley is just 17, you guys. At first, police classified her as a runaway, but within days, that label changed to endangered missing juvenile because the man that she met wasn't just a teenage boyfriend. Later, it was discovered that sometime before sunrise, a vehicle traced back to a man named Tyler Thomas was in the area when Haley left. So like outside her house. When police questioned Tyler, he told them that he did meet with Haley, but Tyler had just dropped her off on the side of a road in Western Ohio. You're gonna drop a 17-year-old off the side of a road. Come on now. But detectives quickly determined that was not true. They searched his vehicle and then his home, and then he had this short-term rental that they even checked, and what they found escalated everything. That's when investigators discovered sexually explicit photos and videos of Haley on Tyler's phone, some of which he had allegedly tried to delete. He was charged with pandering sexually oriented material involving a minor and tampering with evidence. A judge set his bond for $1 million and ordered that if he were released, he would have no internet access and no unsupervised contact with minors. Meanwhile, the neighbors reported police swarming his home, going door to door asking for security footage. Something serious had happened, and investigators believe Tyler knew exactly what. Then on February 1st, everything shifted. Tyler must have had some remorse or just got tired of lying to everybody because he led the FBI to a body in Ohio. That body would be Haley's. 17 years old. A girl who left her house in the dark to meet someone she thought that she knew, someone she thought she could trust. Her family is now facing the kind of confirmation no parent ever wants. And while homicide charges are expected, this case leaves behind this grim reality that there are people online pretending to be good people and that their goal is to prey on innocent little kids. I forgot to also mention that rental property that Tyler owned, well, police believe that's where he killed Haley and dismembered her body. Rest easy, Haley. Condolences to your family. Stay safe out there, you guys.
She popped into a shop before work and then never came out. When her body was discovered days later, she had over 140 wounds, and sickeningly, her killer actually had his sentence reduced. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Paige Doherty. Paige was a 15-year-old girl living in Clydebank, Scotland with her large loving family. Paige and her mother Pamela had an amazing bond. They were more like best friends than they were mother and daughter, and their relationship really reflected most of the relationship within Paige's family. She was very lucky to be born into a very large, loving, caring family unit. She was a very typical teenage girl, which meant that she loved all things to do with makeup, with beauty, hair and fashion. She loved social media and was almost always texting one of her many friends and her boyfriend. Personality-wise, Paige was described as a very sweet soul who was kind, generous, and in general, a lovely young woman. On the morning of the 19th of March 2016, Paige left her friend's house where she had slept the night before and began making her way to her part-time job within a hairdresser's. Before making her way to work, she popped into the Delicious Deli, which was situated on Fleming Avenue. CCTV captured her entering the shop at 8:21 a.m. and never came out. The owner of the deli was 32-year-old John Latham, a happily married father who was running this business pretty successfully. He was described as a very everyday, ordinary, normal man. John would allege that he and Paige went into the back room of the deli where he was taking her details after she was inquiring about a job position. According to him, when he told Paige that he wasn't giving her the job, he still needed to interview and speak to other people, she wasn't getting this job on the spot, she began to scream. She began to threaten John, saying that she was going to report him for inappropriately touching her, and that is when he grabbed a knife. Then he began a sustained, vicious, frenzied attack. He would stab Paige over 60 times, wounding her over 140. 43 of these savage stabs were delivered to Paige's head, neck and face. It was later determined that she had over 80 wounds, which appeared to be from self-defense, proving to the investigators that 15-year-old Paige had fought for her life against this fully grown man. She had put up an incredibly brave fight. Just minutes after Paige entered the deli, John would close the shop, pulling down the shutters and ensuring that no one else came inside. And this was very odd, not something that he did often, if ever at all. When he got talking to another business owner on the street that he worked on, he alluded that he closed the shop because he had just had a hectic morning. He said a member of staff didn't show up, he had a nosebleed, and he actually had to go because he needed to pick up his car. He did go to retrieve his car and changed his trousers in the process. Upon returning back to the area where the shop was, John would go to another nearby shop where he purchased antibacterial wipes and black bin bags. He used these bags to wrap up Paige's body and then carry her outside to his car where he placed her inside of his boot. According to reporting on this footage, you are able to see one of Paige's feet inside of a white sock hanging out of the black bin bag. John would then drive her to his family home where he stored Paige's body inside of his garden shed. He would then return to work, open up the deli and spend the rest of the day serving the customers and preparing food as if nothing had happened. It wouldn't take too long for Paige's family to realise that something wasn't right. She hadn't turned up to her hairdressing job, she hadn't been in contact with any of her friends, and she hadn't been in contact with her boyfriend either. Which, for a young teenage girl, especially someone like Paige who was glued to her phone, this was incredibly unusual. Pamela rang round to all of Paige's friends to see if they were with her, if they had seen her, if they knew where she was, but each and every one of them said no. This was so alarming that Pamela contacted the police and reported her daughter missing. The police began their investigation. A Facebook page was put up in hopes to try and help finding Paige, and missing person posters were also put up. It would take 2 long, agonising days without answers for Paige to finally be discovered. She was found by 2 walkers lay in some undergrowth in some woodland. John Latham would eventually be connected to Paige's murder, and upon his initial arrest, he tried to claim that he had nothing to do with it. He denied any involvement whatsoever. However, once he realised all of the evidence that was stacking against him, including the CCTV footage showing Paige walking into his deli but never walking out, his suspicious behaviour following this, and Paige's blood was also found inside of his shop. After learning all of this, that is when he decided to plead guilty. This is when he would spin his version of events, giving his story about Paige allegedly threatening him. Now, I don't usually give my opinions in these cases, but for this one, I personally think that there could be some truth to that. I don't think that Paige threatened him off the back of this whole job situation, but I do wonder if John had tried to inappropriately touch Paige and she threatened that she was going to report him and he murdered her because he was scared of that. For the senseless murder of 15-year-old Paige Doherty, John would receive a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum term of 27 years to serve. He would appeal this sentence because he thought that 27 years was too long. And shockingly, this appeal actually went through and his sentence was reduced to a minimum term of 23 years to serve.
Still one of Japan's largest unsolved cases, the quadruple homicide of the Miyazawa family in Tokyo's Setagaya neighborhood took place in the middle of the night on New Year's Eve 2000. The murders of Mikio, Yasuko, Nina, and Rei Miyazawa remain unsolved despite a plethora of evidence being left behind by the killer, including blood, DNA, and fingerprints. I covered this case on the latest episode of my podcast, but here's an overview because this is a crazy one. The Miyazawa family was made up of Mikio, who worked in marketing, his wife Yasuko, a teacher, and their two children, 8-year-old Nina and 6-year-old Rei. The family lived in Setagaya in the western suburbs of Tokyo. This was their home. It was actually two homes that were connected on the outside, so they lived in one part and then relatives lived in the other part. The homes weren't connected from the inside and you had to go outside to get from one to the other. The home was adjacent to a park and skate park and they lived there for 10 years, but in the late 1990s, most of their neighbors started to move away because the park was set to expand. And by December 2000, the neighborhood, which once housed 200 families, was only made up of the Miyazawas and their relatives and 2 other families on the street. And the Miyazawas themselves were planning to move a few months into 2001. December 30th, 2000 was a normal day for the family. Nina watched a show with her grandmother Haruko next door until around 9:30 p.m. and then around 10:30 p.m. Mikio logged onto his password-protected email. And that was the last known movement of the family. The next day, Haruko called her daughter Yasuko to make New Year's Eve plans, but Yasuko didn't answer. This was bizarre, so Haruko went next door to check on the family, and once again, they didn't answer the door. Haruko used her key to let herself in and found a horrific scene. All 4 family members had been killed the night before, and they were discovered about 10 hours later. Investigators believed that 6-year-old Rei was killed first, and he was strangled to death in his bed on the 2nd floor. Mikio, hearing the disturbance, rushed upstairs and encountered the killer, who then turned to him and started stabbing him multiple times. The attack was so brutal that part of the knife broke off in Mikio's skull. The killer then attempted to use that same knife to attack Yasuko and Nina, but it was broken, so eventually the killer grabbed another knife and stabbed Yasuko and Nina to death. This quadruple homicide was horrific, and it was being investigated as a home invasion robbery. And the killer left behind so much evidence. The killer remained in the home after committing the murders for at least 2 hours, and during that time, he ransacked the house, ate food, drank tea, and cleaned up his injuries. He also used the family computer, which connected to the internet on December 31st at 1:18 a.m. for 5 minutes. The killer left behind all of these clothes other than the shoes. They were able to determine what shoes he was wearing from footprints outside and inside of the house, but the rest of the clothes seen on this mannequin here were all left behind by the killer. He also left behind blood, DNA, and fingerprints. But unfortunately, when the evidence was logged and checked against police databases, both in Japan and worldwide, there was not a single match. Investigators on the case followed every lead that came in, including tips from a taxi driver who picked up 3 men, one who was injured in the area that night, and witness accounts of people seeing a man walking in the park behind the home. But no suspects were identified, and with no DNA or fingerprint matches, the case started to go cold. But that didn't stop investigators. They continued to visit the home in Setagaya to honor the family and do everything they could to solve the murders. With the DNA, they were able to determine more about the killer. He was believed to be between 15 to 35 years old, and maternal DNA indicated a mother of European descent, and paternal DNA indicated a father of East Asian descent. Unfortunately, this still did not lead to any suspects, and the biggest question was, what was the motive here? By all accounts, the Miyazawas were a well-liked family and had no enemies. A week before the murders, Mikio confronted a group of teens at the skate park who were being really rowdy and noisy, but It didn't turn into a fight or anything aggressive, so this didn't seem to be the motive. The investigation into the Miyazawa family murders is the largest in Japanese history. Over the years, the investigation has involved over 246,000 individuals, and they have collected over 12,000 pieces of evidence. As of 2019, 35 officers still work on the case, and according to the Tokyo Weekender, police have conducted about 1.3 million DNA comparisons in Japan and abroad, but no matches have ever been found. There is still a 20 million yen reward being offered for information leading to an arrest of the killer, and investigators are still doing everything they can to find who committed this horrific crime. The motive remains unclear. It doesn't seem like the murders were a robbery gone wrong, but it also doesn't seem like it was targeted. But there was a lot of evidence left behind, and with DNA technology continuing to advance and genetic genealogy becoming more and more common, there is hope that one day a match will be found and the killer will be identified. Kyo and Yasuko were hardworking, loving parents, and Nina and Rei were wonderful young children with their whole lives ahead of them. Hopefully, one day they will see the justice they deserve.
Let's talk more about the 48 women that are on death row in the United States, and today I am actually going to be talking about the very last person on this list. I saved this one for last because there are so many details behind this case, but I also do truly believe that this is the most demonic and evil woman that is on this list. 42-year-old Tiffany Moss has been on death row in Georgia for the last 6 years, and she is the only woman on death row in Georgia. She was sentenced to death for the absolutely horrific torture and murder of her 10-year-old stepdaughter, Amani Moss. Amani Moss was living alone with her father, Aman, until eventually he married Tiffany in 2009 and they had 2 children together. Less than a year after they got married, Tiffany began to frequently abuse Amani. The first record of abuse was in March of 2010 when Amani was just 6 years old. She told the school nurse that she was afraid to go home with a bad report card because she was afraid her parents were going to hurt her, and she also told the nurse how Tiffany had previously spanked her with a curtain rod. Worried about these comments, the nurse examined Amani right there, and this is when she discovered that she had multiple scabs, bruises, and welts all over her body. After this, Tiffany was actually arrested and she was charged with first-degree child cruelty. She pled guilty to these charges and was sentenced to just 5 years probation. The Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services actually agreed to completely dismiss this case against Tiffany and Aman as long as they completed some parenting classes. During this time, Amani was removed from the home and she was placed with her grandmother, and she was doing great. She was in a much better mood and she was really improving in school. But unfortunately, just 6 months later, Amani was placed back into the custody of Tiffany and Aman, and the abuse continued. Now, since Amani rightfully told the school nurse exactly what was happening to her, this resulted in Tiffany getting criminally charged and ultimately losing her job. A lot of people speculate that because of this, Tiffany resented Amani, and even though she was already abusing her, the abuse just escalated after this happened. Over the next few years, Tiffany continued to severely abuse Amani, and only Amani. There was no evidence that she ever abused the other 2 children. In July of 2012, Amani tried to run away from home twice, and told police both times that she was being abused and she was afraid to go back home. She was not only returned back home both times, but one of these officers actually filed charges against her and gave her a ticket for curfew violation. In May of 2013, they were visiting family when Amani's grandmother noticed that her hair had been cut off. And when she asked Tiffany about it, Tiffany responded saying, quote, "If you act ugly, you should look ugly." In the months after this, Georgia DFCS had been contacted at least 2 more times regarding Amani's welfare. One complaint was regarding how she had been removed from public school that year and they were worried about what would happen to her after that, and another complaint was how she appeared to be thin and neglected. DFCS did nothing about these complaints. They never checked on Amani, they never went to the home, they never even conducted a follow-up because they claimed that they had no address on file. After Amani was removed from public school, Aman began working 2 jobs and was rarely home, leaving Tiffany to be the only one that was ever caring for the children, and obviously things got a lot worse after this. At some point, Tiffany began to lock Amani in her room and starve her. Eventually, Amani became too weak to even move, and she couldn't leave her bed. She was left there to urinate and defecate on herself, all while Tiffany was in the other room baking cookies and making food for her other children. In the early morning hours of October 24th of 2013, Amani had a seizure. When Aman came home from work that day, he found Amani lying in the bathtub completely unresponsive, and Tiffany was just in the other room acting as if nothing was wrong. Instead of taking her to the hospital or calling 911, he placed her back into that bed that she had been confined in and left her there for the next several days until she died on October 28th. She weighed only 32 pounds when she died. 32 pounds. And to put that into perspective, the average weight of a 10-year-old girl is 70 pounds. That's over double of what she weighed. After she died, Aman and Tiffany decided they were going to try to hide her body, and they actually left her body in a room for the next few days until November 1st, when they placed her body into a trash can and decided they were going to try to burn it. They even put their other children in the car with Amani's body inside of the trash can as they searched for a place to burn her body, with the children still in the car. They tried to burn her body for about 5 minutes before they realized that it wasn't going to work, so they put the fire out, put her body back in the car, and drove back home. The next day, Aman drove to work with her body still inside of the car, and this must have haunted him because he ended up telling his friend at work that Amani was dead inside of his car. This friend urged him to call the police. At 4 a.m., he called the police, telling them that his daughter was dead inside of his vehicle and that he wanted to take his own life. After Tiffany realized that he called the police, she did immediately take the kids and run, but eventually she did turn herself into police. Both of them tried to claim that Amani's death was accidental, and she died after drinking some cleaning chemicals. And after she died, they both panicked, tried to hide her body, and tried to cremate her. But after police saw her body and saw how incredibly bruised and extremely thin she was, they immediately knew that they were not telling the truth. Eventually, Aman confessed to covering up Amani's murder and trying to burn her body. In 2015, he pled guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tiffany went to trial in 2019, where a jury found her guilty of Amani's torture and murder, and she was sentenced to death. Tiffany Moss remains on death row in Georgia, where she has been for the last 6 years, and as of right now, she does not have an execution date scheduled. Alright, I have officially talked about every single woman that is on death row in the United States, so that means that the series is over unless obviously another woman gets sentenced to death. The only update that I have since I have started this series is that one of these women does now have an execution date scheduled, and it's actually for this year. Krista Pike is scheduled to be executed in September of this year. I covered her case in part 11 of the series if you want to go back and watch it. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
One place whose existence will never not feel just a little bit wrong to me is Yorktown Memorial Hospital, because tell me why people report a nun in there throwing people. And to understand why so many people would be reporting something as insane as this, you need to kind of understand the backstory and history of the location. Because even though this hospital sits completely abandoned today, it is one of the main reasons that this town remains so haunted. So Yorktown sits in a very particular county in Texas that's known for farming, oil, and Catholic communities. And back in the early 20th century, if anyone was to suffer any kind of injury, traumatic childbirth, anything, they would have to go towns over to receive any type of care. And obviously for emergencies, this could mean death. Community leaders essentially came together and they were like, hey, we have to do something about this. Like, this is for our survival. Fundraisers were organized, local families donated money, and boom, they decided to develop a hospital. In 1950, the construction began, and by 1951, Yorktown Memorial Hospital first opened its doors. And this place wasn't very massive. Like, there was probably like 30 beds inside of there. It had 2 main floors and a basement, 2 wings, and a chapel in the very center of it all. But for this particular town, this was life-changing. And it was run by the Felician Sisters of the Catholic Church, which was a particular Catholic religious order who was known for running hospitals and churches all throughout the US. And the nuns actually lived inside the building on the 2nd floor. Babies began to be born here, people came for farming accidents and other injuries, and pretty soon this place was really woven into the town's identity. But it didn't take long for this small town to start to have rumors of scandal happening within the walls of the hospital/church. And while something like workplace drama is very, very common, I don't think anyone expected this to go a very deadly direction. The priest that worked there actually got one of the nuns pregnant, which, like, gasp, that's a pretty big scandal to happen in such a small town, let alone a priest and a nun. Because of this, it's rumored during this time that the priest didn't have very priestly behavior in other areas of his life as well. And some other member of the town who kind of saw these habits of his decided to be a whistleblower. He felt like the priest was a very dark individual and he wanted to be able to protect the nuns. And so he started to tell people in the town what was going on there and that it wasn't so godly. Because again, even though this is a hospital, it It is still Catholic run. There is a church in the center of it. And the story goes that after one of these workers started to whistleblow, the priest put a hit on him. And he decided to hire people to murder the man in the basement of the building. If you ever go to this place and go on a tour, it's theorized that maybe it even happened in the incinerator down there. But that is not even the only unaliving to have allegedly happened there. Apparently there was also a couple workers who were running around on their spouses, and that ended up in an altercation in which a couple of the people died in the basement. But depending on the version of the story that you hear, it kind of changes on who exactly passed away in that situation. So I kind of don't trust that lore as much. I have a lot more suspicion over the priest case. And the current caretaker of Yorktown Memorial Hospital has actually found human matter, we'll say, down in the basement that could have either been from one of those scandals. But I do tend to think the priest stuff might be a little bit more true than the other one. Maybe they both are, who knows? That's not documented. But this place essentially continued to run as a hospital and started to see an upwards of a lot of deaths. It's stated that it's potentially up to around 2,000, which you might be like, Liz, like that's not really like a whole lot, especially for like a hospital over years and years. Well, this is over the course of 6 years. And again, this is a place where there's like 30 beds in total. So it's giving the vibe of there's other stuff going on here, other prerogatives. It doesn't feel like people know what they're doing. One of the reasons that a lot of people think that this place was seeing a lot more deaths was because of some of the medical professionals that they were hiring. One individual, Dr. Leon Nowarski, was actually known for more mistakes than he was for successes when it came to his surgeries. One of these things literally included the throat of one of his patients while he was operating on their thyroid. And it's kind of unclear on how something like that could have been a mistake. But regardless, he was one of the main medical professionals that was operating and running that facility during that time. But quickly there started to be a decline of rural hospitals because healthcare really started to shift by the 70s, the 80s. In 1986, the hospital officially closed its doors. It did open up again in the early 1990s as a drug rehabilitation center for a little bit. And this chapter of this building's existence is very like undocumented, but obviously something that would have been very significant. I'd like to believe that this place was really doing good during this time, but I'm sure all the things that went into the clinic, including withdrawal, detoxing, relapsing, made this place a very emotionally heavy space. But after only a few years of doing this, Yorktown Memorial Hospital shut its doors for good. And it's basically just sat abandoned for years. And let me tell you, Texas heat is not kind to abandoned structures. And inside this very moldy, leaky place lies patient files that have been left behind, wheelchairs, surgical lights, teeth, and the longer this place sat on its own, the more the stories around it began. This place started to get a lot of media attention around the early 2000s. People who went to go urban explore this facility experienced things like shadowy figures, full body apparitions, disembodied voices, and so many people report a spirit of a little girl by the name of Stacy, who will either roam on the first floor or play in the basement and likes people to read to her or sing her songs. But truly worst of all is the spirit of the nun that I talked about at the beginning. Because again, what do you mean a nun attacks people? Well, obviously during that time there was very strict rules that nuns had to abide by and also make other people abide by. No tattoos, being modest. And so now whenever people enter this building and they aren't abiding by those Catholic rules, they get attacked by something or someone. And people will report seeing an entire apparition of this nun before it attacks them, fully in a nun's outfit, in a habit and everything. And people will say whenever they preach, share Bible verses, whatever, that they will see red glowing eyes before being violently attacked, which is just like, what in the Valak is going on here? Which is not so bad that even the current caretaker today, his wife will not go inside of there anymore because she's afraid of being pushed or shoved again. And he literally said that one day when he came home, it looked like she had been like, and so many other people report being shoved or scratched by this entity. But whatever negative emotions and things that happen within these walls is now kind of masquerading itself around as a nun, because that's what it's seen there for so long. Most people also report growls as well, but it's like, who knows, because it's an abandoned building, animals get in, the whole thing just scares me. One of the creepiest parts of the episode whenever Ghost Adventurers went there is they caught a very clear EVP that stated, and I quote, "You want to play? It must be told and I'll tell them you did it. It's sick. Don't go in the bathroom, okay? Get in there. The killer is coming. Get in the hallway." That to me sends the eeriest of chills down my spine. Even though this place is completely decaying from the outside, it seems like all of the things that are kept inside are like posting memories, and the spirits are just replaying everything that had happened there. But because of how sketchy the structural deterioration of the building actually is, they're really hesitant to let people back inside at the moment. But because of how sketchy the deterioration of the building actually is, it's just very structurally unsafe, they're probably going to demolish it very soon. But before that happens, I figured that we could take this 7-hour drive and go there together. I want to know if this nun exists. I'm curious. I'm sorry.
Really? I took off down this hallway. So
this is where the doctor would actually practice?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know what that's bandage is.